The sound of cars echoed through the busy streets of Sao Paulo, but Marina was oblivious to it all. Sitting in a cafe downtown, she stared at her phone screen. Aitor's messages were there crystal clear. "I'm sorry, Marina. I can't keep doing this. I think you need something I can't give you." She read and reread those words until her tears blurred the screen. It was always the same. She fell in love, believed it would be different this time, and then the relationship would fall apart. Hours later, Marina was at her best friend Renata's apartment, venting over a glass of wine. "It's like I'm cursed, Renata. No matter what I do, I always end up alone." Renata sighed, sitting beside her on the couch. "Don't say that, Marina. You know it's not true. But have you ever thought about why this keeps happening?" Marina threw her head back, frustrated. "Because I'm a disaster, that's why. Or maybe I'm just not made for love." Renata firmly took her hand. "Marina, listen. I know this is hard. But have you ever heard of Family Constellations? My cousin did it. And she said it revealed things about her family that completely changed how she saw her relationships." Marina looked at her skeptically. "Family constellations? You think my love problems have something to do with my family?" Renata nodded. "I'm not sure. But sometimes we carry things we don't even realize. Traumas, stories, patterns. It could be coming from your past." In the days that followed, Marina couldn't get Renata's suggestion out of her head. She felt torn. Part of her thought it was nonsense. But another part, something inside her, resonated with the idea. One afternoon, she visited her mother, Cecilia. As they sipped coffee on the veranda, Marina tried to broach the topic carefully. "Mom, do you think our family has secrets? Things that were never said?" Cecilia paused, surprised by the question. "Why are you asking this, dear?" Marina shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Oh, nothing really. I was just thinking about how certain things seem to repeat in our family. Like relationships. You and Dad got divorced. Your mom also had problems in her marriage. And it feels like nothing works out for me either." Cecilia furrowed her brow, visibly uncomfortable. "Every story is different, Marina. I don't think you need to worry about that." But there was something in her mother's expression that made Marina suspicious. It was as if Cecilia knew more than she was letting on, but was determined to keep it hidden. Determined to dig deeper, Marina followed Renata's suggestion and booked a family constellation session. When she walked into Anna's office, a wave of nervousness washed over her. The space was welcoming, but the weight of her expectations made her uneasy. Anna greeted her with a calm smile. "Marina, welcome. Before we begin, can you tell me why you're here?" Marina took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. I'm not entirely sure. I just know my relationships never work out. It feels like no matter what I do, I end up alone. And my friend suggested it might have something to do with my family." Anna nodded, understanding. "Often, family patterns we don't recognize can shape our lives in surprising ways. Let's work together to understand what might be happening in your family system." Marina watched as Anna placed figures representing members of her family in the center of the room. As she looked at the pieces symbolizing her mother, father, and herself, a shiver ran through her. "Marina, when you look at these representations, what do you feel?" Anna asked. Marina hesitated, but then the words started to pour out. "I feel distance. It's like there's this huge gap between me and my parents. Something I could never fill." Anna moved the pieces closer together in different configurations. "And when you think about your parents' relationship, what comes to mind?" Marina closed her eyes, memories from her childhood flooding back. Fights. Endless arguments. And after they divorced, it felt like my mom could never really move on. She'd say she was fine, but she never seemed truly happy. Anna tilted her head, watching Marina closely. "Sometimes we carry unresolved pain from our parents, or even from generations before them. Let's explore this further." When Anna moved another piece to the center, representing Marina's grandmother, something unexpected happened. Marina felt a lump in her throat and a heavy weight on her chest. "Who is this?" she asked, pointing to the piece. Anna gave her an encouraging smile. "This piece represents your grandmother. There's something in her story that needs to be seen. Something that might be influencing your life today." Tears welled up in Marina's eyes, though she couldn't explain why. It was as if something deep inside her was stirring, something that had been buried for a long time. Marina stared intently at the piece representing her grandmother. Something about that simple figure seemed to pull her toward a place she couldn't quite identify. Anna, with the calm demeanor of someone experienced in navigating deep emotional waters, adjusted the pieces in the center of the room. "Marina, what do you know about your maternal grandmother?" Marina blinked, trying to push away the wave of emotion that washed over her. "Not much, really. My mother never talks about her. I only know that she died when I was a child, and that they didn't get along. But I always found it strange, because my mom seems to carry a sadness I've never understood." Anna nodded, moving the grandmother's piece closer to Marina's mother. "Sometimes, what isn't said weighs as much as what is. What do you feel when you look at this configuration?" Marina took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I feel loneliness and pain, like something happened, but no one wants to talk about it." Anna adjusted another piece on the board, symbolizing Marina. "And you, Marina? Where do you see yourself in this system?" Marina looked at the piece representing her, positioned on the opposite side of the circle. "I feel distant. It's like there's a wall between me and my mom. And looking at this now, I feel that wall has to do with my grandmother." Anna leaned in slightly, her expression suggesting she had picked up on something important. "Let's explore that. Think about your mom and your grandmother. Is there something you've always wanted to know, but never had the courage to ask?" Marina hesitated but then nodded. "Yes, I've always wanted to know why my mom never talks about her. When I was a child, I'd ask about grandma, but my mom always changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped asking." Anna looked at Marina with a reassuring smile. "Maybe it's time to ask again. Sometimes, the truth we avoid is exactly what we need to face." That evening, Marina went to her mother's house. Cecilia was in the kitchen, finishing up the dishes, when Marina walked in. "Marina? What a surprise. Is everything okay?" Marina forced a smile. "Yes, Mom. I just wanted to talk to you." Cecilia dried her hands on a dish towel, watching her daughter curiously. "Of course. About what?" Marina sat at the table, her heart racing. "About Grandma. Why don't you ever talk about her, Mom?" Cecilia's face instantly hardened. "Marina, why are you asking about this now?" "Because I feel like there's something I need to know," Marina replied, her voice trembling but determined. "Something about her, and about you. Please, Mom. I need to understand." Cecilia looked away, and for a moment, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Finally, Cecilia sat down, her shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "My mother. She was a difficult woman, Marina. Very difficult. She married young, had a hard life. My father left her when I was little, and she never got over it. She was always angry, always took it out on me. I grew up feeling like I was never enough, that no matter what I did, she would never be satisfied." Marina felt a lump form in her throat as she listened. "And then, what happened?" Cecilia stared at her hands, as if searching for the courage to continue. "After you were born, she was still with us. But things between us were already so bad. I couldn't stand being around her. And she didn't seem to want to be around me either. When she died, I felt relief. And also a lot of guilt." "Guilt for what?" Marina asked, tears streaming down her face. "For never understanding each other," Cecilia replied, her voice breaking. "For not being the daughter she wanted. for spending so much time trying to prove something to her, when all I wanted was for her to love me as I was. Marina felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Her mother's words resonated deeply, as if they described exactly what Marina herself felt in her own relationships. Mom, do you think that in some way I've been trying to prove something to you? Or to someone? Cecilia looked at her daughter surprised. I never wanted you to feel that, Marina. But maybe you're carrying more than you should. Maybe you're trying to fix what was broken between me and my mother. At her next session with Anna, Marina shared everything she had learned. Anna rearranged the pieces, positioning them so Marina's grandmother, Cecilia, and Marina formed a triangle. Marina, how do you feel looking at this now? Marina studied the pieces, her eyes welling with tears. I feel like my mom always tried to be different from my grandmother, but deep down, she ended up carrying the same pain. And I think I inherited it too. Anna nodded. Sometimes we repeat patterns because we haven't given a place to what came before. Marina, can you look at the piece representing your grandmother and say something to her? Marina took a deep breath before speaking, her voice heavy with emotion. I see you. I see your pain. And I understand that you did the best you could. As she said those words, Marina felt something inside her begin to lift. Marina couldn't sleep that night. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, stirring a whirlwind of questions she didn't know how to answer. Something about her grandmother's story felt incomplete, as if more was hidden beneath the surface. The next morning, with a cup of coffee in hand, she took an old box of photos and documents that Cecilia had kept in the living room cabinet. As she sifted through yellowed papers, something caught her attention. A photo of her grandmother holding a baby. Marina frowned, trying to make sense of it. This doesn't add up. My mom was born much later. Who's this baby? That same day, Marina went back to her mother's house, determined to get answers. Cecilia was on the porch tending to her plants when Marina arrived with the photo in hand. Mom, what's this? Marina asked bluntly. Cecilia looked at the photo, her face going pale. Marina, where did you find this? In that box of documents. Who's this baby, Mom? It's not you, is it? Cecilia hesitated, looking away. It's my brother. He died before I was born. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. You had a brother? Why have you never talked about him? Cecilia sighed, setting down her gardening tools. Because it's a pain I've always carried, but could never talk about. My mother, she never got over losing him. She was trapped in that grief, and I grew up feeling like I could never take his place. I think that's why she always seemed so dissatisfied with me. When Marina shared this new discovery with Anna, the therapist rearranged the pieces in the center of the room, adding a new representation for Cecilia's brother. Marina, sometimes when a family loses someone, the absence becomes so significant that it shapes the dynamics of everyone who comes after. Have you ever thought about the impact this loss might have had on your grandmother, your mother, and even you? Marina shook her head, her eyes fixed on the piece representing her mother's brother. I never thought about it, but now looking at this, it all makes sense. My mom always seemed to carry an emptiness that nothing could fill, and I grew up trying to be perfect, trying to fill a void I never understood. Anna nodded. The emptiness your mother felt wasn't her fault. She was connected to your grandmother's pain, and in a way so were you. Anna moved the piece representing the deceased brother to a central position on the board, bringing it closer to the grandmother and Cecilia. Marina, I want you to look at this piece and say something to him. Something that acknowledges his memory and gives it a place. Marina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words she was about to speak. I see you. I see that you were loved, even though your life was short. And I understand that your absence left a mark on all of us. But now, I want to give you a place in our hearts without it being a burden for those who remain. When she finished speaking, Marina felt a wave of relief wash over her. Anna adjusted the pieces again, this time bringing Marina closer to her mother and grandmother. When we give a place to what has been lost, we allow love to flow again. Marina, how do you feel looking at this now? Marina looked at the board, her eyes brimming with tears. I feel like I finally understand. I always thought the problem was with me, that something was wrong with me. But now I see I was carrying something that wasn't even mine. Anna smiled gently. That's one of the greatest truths of constellation therapy. We often carry burdens that belong to those who came before us. But when we recognize that, we can choose to leave them where they belong. That night, Marina went home and called Renata. So, how did the session go? Her friend asked, curious. Marina took a deep breath before answering. It was eye-opening. I found out my mom had a brother who died before she was born. And I realized that much of what I've been feeling actually comes from her pain and my grandmother's. It's like for the first time, everything is starting to make sense. Renata smiled on the other end of the line. That's amazing, Marina. I think you're on the right path. Yes, Marina replied, her tone firmer. And now I want to understand how this can change my relationships. Because I still feel like there's something I need to figure out. The days following Marina's last constellation session were a mix of relief and unease. She was finally beginning to understand the pains her family carried, but something still weighed heavily on her shoulders. If I now know what happened in the past, why do I still feel like something is holding me back? She asked herself as she walked through the sunny streets. With this thought, she decided to schedule another session with Anna. There were more questions that needed answers. And Marina knew the key to breaking free from her cycles in love was hidden somewhere within her. When Marina arrived at Anna's office, she was greeted with an encouraging smile. Marina, are you ready to continue? What would you like to work on today? Marina didn't hesitate. My relationships. I always end up alone, Anna. And now, I think it has more to do with my family than with who I am. Anna nodded, moving the pieces on the board to include figures representing Marina's romantic relationships. Let's explore this. Marina, how do you feel when you look at these pieces? Marina stared intently at the representations of her ex-boyfriends. The piece for Aitor was closer, like a still fresh memory, while the others were farther away. I feel like they were never fully there, as if something was keeping them away from me, even when I tried to get closer. Anna moved the pieces to connect Marina's relationships with the figures representing Cecilia and Marina's father. Sometimes, our romantic dynamics reflect what we saw and experienced with our parents. How would you describe their relationship? Marina took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. They were distant. It always seemed like there was something between them that couldn't be resolved. My mom would say my dad was cold, and my dad would say my mom was dramatic. When they separated, I felt like it was a relief for both of them. Anna tilted her head, observing the pieces. And you? How did that impact you? Marina hesitated before responding, the words coming out with difficulty. I'm afraid all relationships will end up like that. Cold, empty. So, sometimes I don't fully invest myself. Other times, I overcommit, trying to fix something before it even breaks. Anna moved Marina's piece to the center of the board, surrounding it with the figures representing her ex-boyfriends. Marina, I want you to look at these pieces and ask yourself, what are you really seeking in these relationships? Marina remained silent for a few moments, staring at the pieces as if searching for an answer within them. I think I'm seeking security. I want to feel like I won't be abandoned, like I did when my parents separated. But at the same time, I think I don't know how to receive that, because I'm always expecting things to fall apart. Anna nodded, moving the pieces again. And do you think this fear comes only from you? Anna brought back the figures for Cecilia and Marina's grandmother. Think about your grandmother. who lost a child. Think about your mother, who grew up under the weight of that pain and absence. Now think about yourself, growing up in the shadow of your parents' detachment. What do these stories have in common? Tears welled up in Marina's eyes as she spoke. The fear of loss, the fear of not being enough. Anna leaned closer, looking directly at Marina. And what if you could choose something different? What if you could decide that these stories end here with you? What would you do differently? Marina wiped away her tears, her voice trembling but firm. I would choose to trust. I would choose to believe that I can be loved, even without having to prove anything. Anna moved the pieces to symbolize the balance Marina was beginning to seek, saying that is the first step. But to truly break these patterns, you'll need to practice it in your life. It won't be easy, but now you know where this fear comes from. It's not yours. It belongs to the past. And you can leave it there. Marina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything. I want to try. I don't know how, but I want to. Anna smiled. And that's the greatest act of courage. That evening, Marina went to the bar where Renata was waiting for a drink. As the two talked about the constellation session, Renata pointed toward the bar entrance. Marina, look who just walked in. Marina turned and saw Aitor, her last boyfriend, walking toward the counter. He seemed to hesitate for a moment before noticing Marina and waving, a timid smile on his face. Renata nudged her friend's arm. Maybe this is your chance to try something new. Marina stood frozen for a few seconds, her heart racing. Finally, she got up, determined. I'm going to talk to him. The bar was crowded, but for Marina, the world seemed to have fallen silent. Aitor was walking toward her with hesitant steps, as uncertain as she was about what this encounter might mean. Hi, Marina, he said, his timid smile lighting up his face. Hi, Aitor, she replied, trying to sound casual, even though her heart was racing. Renata, sensing the intensity of the moment, smiled discreetly and stepped away. I'll get another drink. You two should talk. Aitor sat across from Marina, his hands nervously resting on the table. I wasn't expecting to see you here, he said. Neither was I, Marina replied, with an uncertain smile. There was an awkward silence between them until Aitor took a deep breath and leaned forward slightly. How are you? Marina hesitated, thinking about how to respond. On one hand, she wanted to say she was fine and that he didn't need to worry. But on the other, she knew this was the moment to be honest. I'm trying to figure some things out, she finally said. About myself, about what happened between us. And you? Aitor seemed relieved by her honesty. Me too. I think that's why I ended things. Not because I didn't care about you, but because it felt like something was off. Something we couldn't figure out. Marina nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. I think I tried too hard, you know? I always thought that if I were good enough, things would work out. But now I'm realizing this isn't just about you. It's about me and what I'm carrying. Aitor frowned, intrigued. What do you mean? Marina took a deep breath, feeling this was the moment to fully open up. I started doing family constellation therapy. I've discovered that many of my fears and behaviors come from things that aren't even mine, but things I inherited from my family, like the fear of being abandoned, the fear of not being enough. I think it made me act in unhealthy ways, even without realizing it. Aitor was silent for a few seconds, processing what she was saying. I never thought about it that way, but it makes sense. Sometimes it felt like you were trying to solve something bigger, something I couldn't reach. Marina felt tears threatening to fall but held them back. And that pushed you away? Aitor nodded, but his gaze was full of understanding. Yes, but not because I didn't want to stay. It was because I didn't know how to help. I always thought I needed to give you more space, but maybe what you needed was for me to understand. Marina felt a wave of relief hearing those words. For the first time, she felt that Aitor truly understood what had happened between them. I'm not saying I know how to fix everything, she said. But I'm learning. I'm trying to stop carrying these fears. Stop expecting things to fall apart before they even begin. Aitor smiled, his gaze sincere. And I want to learn too. I don't think I ever really tried to understand what you were going through. Maybe if we'd had this conversation earlier. Marina finished the sentence. Maybe things would have been different. Aitor leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Do you think we still have a chance? To try again, but differently this time. Marina felt her heart race. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part knew she needed to be cautious. She needed to make sure she was ready for this. I think we can try, she said with a shy smile. But I think we need to take it slow. I'm still learning, Aitor. I'm still trying to figure out who I am without all these chains. Then let's learn together, he replied. No rush. No expectations. Just trying. A few days later, Marina returned to Anna's office to talk about her reunion with Aitor. It was different this time, she said. For the first time, I felt like I was being honest, both with him and with myself. Anna smiled, adjusting the pieces on the board. And how did that feel for you? Marina took a deep breath, feeling warmth in her chest. Liberating. I always thought I had to prove something to the people I was in relationships with. But now I realize the most important thing is understanding myself first. Anna nodded, moving the pieces to symbolize the balance Marina was beginning to achieve. You've taken an important step, Marina. But remember, this is a process. You're building something new, and that takes patience and courage. Marina looked at the board, feeling a wave of hope. For the first time, the future seemed like an open space, full of possibilities. Marina and Aitor had decided to start over, but with one clear rule: no rush. Their reunion seemed to bring a new lightness, but at the same time, something unsettling lingered in the back of Marina's mind. As she returned from a walk in the park, she reflected on the patterns Anna had mentioned. Old ghosts always try to come back. What changes is how you choose to face them. At that moment, she didn't know how tested she would be in the days to come. Marina was at Cecilia's house for lunch when she decided to share that she was reconciling with Aitor. So, you and Aitor are getting back together? Cecilia asked as she stirred a pot of rice. Yes, but we're taking it slow, Marina replied cautiously. I think he understands better what I'm going through now. Cecilia let out a heavy sigh and turned to her daughter. Just be careful, Marina. Men can be complicated. Sometimes they say they understand, but they end up leaving you when you need them the most. Marina felt her chest tighten. That phrase seemed to come straight from her childhood, when her mother often spoke about her father in the same tone. Mom, I know you had your struggles, but that doesn't mean all men are the same, Marina said, trying to sound firm. I'm not saying they're all the same, but it's wise not to trust too much. Marina didn't reply. Instead, she swallowed the lump forming in her throat. No matter how much she knew she was changing, it was hard not to feel pulled back into the fear she had carried for so long. A few days later, Marina and Aitor were sitting at a small restaurant, enjoying a casual dinner. The conversation was flowing well, but at one point, Aitor said something that made her uncomfortable. I was thinking, maybe we should plan a trip together. Something small, just the two of us. Marina felt her stomach churn. The idea sounded nice, but it also brought up an old fear. The need to commit and the risk of losing control. I don't know, Aitor. Maybe it's too soon for that, she replied, avoiding his gaze. Aitor looked confused. Too soon? We're not planning to get married, Marina. I'm just suggesting something light, so we can spend more time together. But that's exactly what worries me, she replied, her voice firmer than she intended. It always starts light, and before I know it, I'm trapped in something I can't control. Aitor leaned back slightly, clearly surprised by her reaction. Marina, I'm not trying to trap you. I just want to share something with you. But at that moment, Marina's fear spoke louder. I think it's better if we don't plan anything for now. It's just too much for me. The rest of the dinner was marked by an uncomfortable silence, and Marina went home feeling like she had taken a step back. The next day, Marina went to Anna's office, eager to share what had happened. Anna, no matter how hard I try, it seems like I always find a way to mess things up. Ador just wanted to plan a trip, and I turned it into a problem. Anna listened attentively before responding. And why do you think you reacted that way? Marina sighed, placing her hands on her lap. I think I'm still afraid. Afraid of committing and then being abandoned. Afraid that if I let things flow, everything will fall apart like before. Anna moved the pieces on the board, connecting Marina to the piece representing Cecilia. Marina, when you think about your mother's words about not trusting too much, what do you feel? I feel like she's still with me in a way, Marina said with a bitter smile. It's like her beliefs are tattooed on me. Anna nodded, moving another piece to represent Ator. And how do you think those beliefs affect your relationship with Ator? Marina was silent for a moment before responding. I think I'm expecting him to leave me, even when he just wants to be with me. I create barriers to protect myself. Anna adjusted the pieces again, distancing Cecilia's representation and bringing Marina closer to Ator. Marina, I want you to look at the piece representing your mother and say something to her. Something that allows you to move forward without carrying her fears. Marina took a deep breath before beginning. Mom, I see you. I know you did the best you could with everything you carried, but I choose a different path. I choose to trust, even when it feels risky. I choose to believe I can be loved. As she said the words, Marina felt tears streaming down her face, but also a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. Anna smiled, satisfied. You're starting to create your own path, Marina, and that takes courage. But remember, it's normal to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. The important thing is to keep moving. That same night, Marina met Ator at the park where they used to walk. He looked tense, but there was a tenderness in his eyes that encouraged her to speak. I wanted to apologize for dinner, she began. It wasn't fair to you. I think sometimes I still let my fears speak louder. Ator smiled gently, taking her hands. I just want you to know that I'm here, Marina. I don't expect you to figure everything out all at once. I just want to walk beside you, at your pace. His words touched something deep inside her, and for the first time, Marina felt that maybe she could trust. Thank you, Ator. I want that too. I want to try, even if it's hard. The days that followed were marked by a new lightness between Marina and Ator. They resumed their walks in the park, quiet dinners, and conversations that seemed to flow without the weight of the past. But, as Anna had warned, old patterns sometimes try to resurface when we least expect them. Marina was at work, reviewing a report when her phone rang. Cecilia's name appeared on the screen, and she hesitated before answering. Mom, is everything okay? On the other end of the line, Cecilia sounded anxious. Marina, I was thinking about visiting you tonight. Can I? Marina swallowed hard. Although she loved her mother, she knew her visits often stirred up old tensions. Of course, Mom. Come over. Cecilia arrived punctually, bringing a pie that Marina loved. Ator was also there, helping set the table. So, Ator, Cecilia began with a calculated smile. Are you and Marina really getting back together? Marina felt her discomfort grow, but Ator responded calmly. Yes, Mrs. Cecilia. We're trying to do things differently this time. That's good, she replied, with a tone that suggested more doubt than approval. I just hope this time you know what you're doing, Marina. Not everything that's broken can be fixed. The remark hit Marina like a blow. She knew her mother didn't mean any harm, but those words carried echoes of years of insecurity. Mom, Ator and I are fine, Marina said, trying to stay calm. We don't need to fix anything. We're building something new. Cecilia looked at her, clearly surprised by the firmness in her daughter's voice. I hope so, dear. I really do. After Cecilia left, Marina sat on the couch, visibly shaken. Ador sat beside her, holding her hand. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, Marina replied with a heavy sigh. My mom always manages to bring out all my insecurities. No matter how hard I try, it feels like I can never fully distance myself from what she carries. Ador pulled her closer. Maybe you don't need to distance yourself. Maybe you just need to learn how to look at it without letting it define you. His words echoed something Anna had said, and Marina realized Ador was right. It was time to face her fears once and for all. In her next session with Anna, Marina talked about the dinner and how she felt after her mother's comments. It's always like this, Marina said. No matter how hard I try, she always finds a way to pull me back to that place of insecurity. Anna nodded, rearranging the pieces on the board. And how do you react when that happens? I freeze, Marina replied. Part of me wants to scream, to tell her I'm fine and don't need her approval. But another part feels like maybe she's right, and I end up doubting myself. Anna moved the piece representing Cecilia, placing it in a more distant position on the board. Marina, I want you to try something. Look at the piece that represents your mother and say, I see you, but I choose a different path. Marina hesitated but finally said the words, I see you, Mom, but I choose a different path. As she said this, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was as if, for the first time, she was giving herself permission to be free. That same night, as Marina and Ador walked through the park, he broke the silence with an unexpected question. Marina, have you ever thought about doing a constellation session with me? She stopped walking, surprised. With you? Why would you do that? Because I think if we're building something together, it would be good to understand more about the patterns that brought us here. I also have things I need to resolve, Marina. I don't want my fears or insecurities to interfere with what we're trying to create. Marina felt her eyes fill with tears, touched by Ador's sincerity. Would you do that for us? I'd do it for me, he replied with a smile. But also for us. Marina knew Ador's proposal was a sign of commitment, but she also felt the weight of her own expectations. If they were about to dive into this process together, they needed to be prepared for whatever they might uncover. However, for the first time, she felt ready to face anything. Not because she had overcome all her fears, but because she finally believed she didn't have to face them alone. Anna's office was brighter than Marina remembered. Perhaps it was a reflection of how she felt. Less heavy, less burdened. But as she looked at Ador sitting beside her, she felt a twinge of anxiety. He seemed calm, but she knew how challenging this experience was for him too. Are you ready to begin? Anna asked in her serene tone. They both nodded, exchanging a knowing glance. Anna started by positioning the pieces representing Ador in the center of the board. Him, his parents, and an older brother who had died when he was a child. Let's start with you, Ador. When you look at this setup, what do you feel? Ador remained silent for a few moments before responding. I feel distance, especially with my father. He was always very rigid, very critical. I grew up trying to prove I was good enough for him. But it never seemed to be enough. Anna moved Ador's and his father's pieces closer together. And about your brother? What do you know about him? Ador took a deep breath, as if those memories still deeply affected him. My brother died before I was born. My parents always talked about him, as if he were perfect. I think deep down they expected me to be like him. Marina observed in silence as Ador opened up. It was the first time she heard these words, and they helped explain so much about him. Anna looked at Ador empathetically. When we carry expectations that stem from a loss, we can feel trapped in a role we didn't choose. Ador, can you say something to your brother, acknowledging his place in the family? Ador nodded, though his voice trembled as he spoke. I see you. I know you were loved, even though your life was short. But now, I let you rest and choose to live my own life. Relief was visible on Aitor's face, as if a long-held weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. Anna then moved Aitor's pieces to the side and brought Marina's back to the board. Marina, when you look at your configuration, what do you feel now? Marina looked at the pieces representing her mother, her grandmother, and Cecilia's deceased brother. I feel like things are clearer. I see that I carried my mother's fear and my grandmother's grief. But now, I think I can start letting that go. Anna brought Marina's piece closer to Aitor's. And how do you feel about him now? Marina looked at Aitor, smiling softly. I see that he also carries his own pain. And I think for the first time, I'm ready to walk beside him, without trying to fix anything. Just being who I am. Anna rearranged the pieces, creating a new setup where Marina and Aitor stood side by side, but connected to their families in a balanced way. When each person finds their rightful place in the family system, it's possible to build something new together. Can you both look at this setup and say what you wish for the future? Aitor spoke first. I want to build something that is ours. Something that isn't defined by the past, but by who we choose to be now. Marina took a deep breath, feeling tears stream down as she spoke. And I want that too. I want to trust in love, without the weight of all the stories that came before. Anna smiled, satisfied. You're ready, not because you've solved everything, but because you've decided to walk together with awareness and courage. That night, back at the apartment, Marina and Aitor sat together on the couch, embraced. For the first time, Marina felt truly at peace. I never thought a constellation session could change so much, she said. Neither did I, Aitor replied. But I think we needed it. We needed to understand where we came from to know where we want to go. Marina smiled, looking at him tenderly. And where do we want to go? Aitor took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Wherever we want, as long as it's together. As the camera or narration pulls away, we see Marina and Aitor on the couch, laughing and talking. Marina's voice softly echoes. Love isn't perfect, nor does it need to be. It's built through daily choices, the courage to look within, and above all, trust. Today I choose to trust. I choose to love. With this chapter, Marina and Aitor's journey comes to an end, showing that it is possible to break family patterns, heal wounds, and build a genuine love based on awareness and trust.